March 14, 1943, Naval Air Station, Corpus Christi, Texas. Seaman First Class Robert Daniels scrubbed grease from a roasting pan and watched the clock tick toward 2300 hours. Kitchen duty was supposed to be punishment, 3 days of garbage detail and dishwashing, because he'd missed morning muster after oversleeping. The enlisted mess hall was empty now, just Daniels and the industrial sinks, and the distant hum of aircraft engines from the flight line. He'd been at it for 6 hours. Then he heard voices, not from the mess hall entrance, from the ventilation grate near the ceiling, voices carrying through the ductwork from somewhere above. Daniels froze, suds dripping from his hands. The words were muffled but distinct. German words. His blood ran cold. Corpus Christi trained naval aviators by the thousands, pilots who would fly Hellcats and Corsairs against Japanese Zeros in the Pacific. The base processed classified flight test data, experimental radar equipment, and tactical doctrine bulletins. And somewhere in this building, men were speaking German. Daniels glanced at the door. He could report this to the shore patrol and probably be laughed at. Kitchen worker claims he heard German spies. More likely it was instructors reviewing captured intelligence documents, or his exhausted mind playing tricks after a 16-hour day. But the voices continued, urgent, deliberate, and one phrase came through clear enough to understand: Die Frequenzen für nächste Woche, the frequencies for next week. What this 20-year-old seaman would discover in the next 72 hours would expose the most damaging espionage operation on American soil since the war began, and prevent classified radio intelligence from reaching U-boat wolf packs in the Atlantic. By early 1943, German intelligence operations in the United States had reached desperate sophistication. The FBI had dismantled several spy rings in 1941 and 1942, including the famous Duquesne network that had compromised military production data. But naval intelligence knew other networks remained active. Intercepted German naval communications referenced American sources, providing radio frequencies, convoy routing information, and technological specifications. The sources had codenames. Their locations remained unknown. The threat was existential. German U-boats were winning the Battle of the Atlantic. In 1942 alone, they sank over 1,100 Allied merchant vessels, 6 million tons of shipping. The Wolfpack tactics pioneered by Admiral Donitz relied on intelligence coordination. U-boats needed to know where convoys would be, what radio frequencies escort ships used, and what detection technology they carried. American counterintelligence faced a mathematical nightmare. The Navy employed over 2 million personnel by 1943. Training facilities like Corpus Christi processed thousands of officers and enlisted men monthly. Anyone could be compromised. Anyone could be passing information. Traditional investigation methods, surveillance, wiretaps, financial audits, worked too slowly. By the time agents developed probable cause, months of intelligence could have already crossed the Atlantic. Naval Air Station Corpus Christi was a particularly valuable target. The facility trained carrier pilots and tested experimental aircraft systems. Classified documents moved through the base constantly. Radar performance reports, radio frequency allocations, tactical bulletins on Japanese aircraft capabilities. Intelligence officers maintained strict compartmentalization, but the base was enormous, over 20,000 personnel spread across 2,000 acres, perfect cover for covert communications. What made the situation particularly devastating was the sophistication of German tradecraft. The Abwehr, German military intelligence, had learned from earlier failures. Modern networks used native-born Americans or naturalized citizens with impeccable documentation. They avoided radio transmissions when possible, instead using dead drops, coded newspaper advertisements, and diplomatic pouches through neutral countries. Some intelligence passed through Mexico, where Axis sympathizers operated with relative freedom. The FBI's Special Intelligence Service had informants in Mexico City and Buenos Aires, but coverage was incomplete. Naval intelligence estimated that dozens of reports, perhaps hundreds, had reached Germany without detection. Each report compromised American lives. Convoy routes given to U-boats meant torpedoed merchant ships and drowned sailors. Radio frequencies meant U-boats could evade detection. Aircraft performance data meant Japanese pilots knew exactly how to fight American fighters. Lieutenant Commander William Siebold, who had helped break the Duquesne Ring while working as a double agent, later wrote in his debriefing, "The Germans weren't idiots. They knew we'd caught the obvious spies. What frightened me was who we hadn't caught. The patient ones, the careful ones, the ones smart enough to hide in plain sight." By March 1943, Naval Intelligence had created a special counterintelligence unit at major training bases. These units investigated security violations, monitored foreign national employees, and analyzed communication patterns for anomalies. At Corpus Christi, this unit consisted of 3 officers and 2 enlisted specialists. They reviewed approximately 200 security incidents per month, most involving minor breaches like unsecured documents or inappropriate discussions of classified material. The unit had identified several concerning patterns. Classified documents had gone missing from the radar testing facility. An instructor with distant German relatives had received unusual mail from Argentina. A civilian radio technician had been observed in restricted areas without proper authorization. But none of these incidents provided sufficient evidence for prosecution. The investigators needed either a confession, witnesses to actual espionage, or documented proof of information transmission. What they couldn't have known was that the evidence they needed was being collected at that moment by a seaman first class who was supposed to be washing dishes. The Abwehr considered American counterintelligence a manageable obstacle. German intelligence assessments from the period consistently underestimated FBI capabilities and dismissed naval intelligence as bureaucratic and slow-moving. One Abwehr briefing document, captured in 1945, stated, "American security services lack the ideological commitment and organizational discipline of European intelligence agencies. They are hampered by constitutional restrictions and public oversight." This confidence had foundation in reality. Early American counterintelligence had been reactive and fragmented. The FBI and military intelligence agencies competed rather than cooperated. Legal restrictions on domestic surveillance meant investigators often couldn't act until after damage occurred, and the sheer scale of American mobilization created countless opportunities for penetration. The network operating around Corpus Christi exploited these weaknesses perfectly. Its members weren't stereotypical spies. They were Americans, second-generation German immigrants, with convincing cover stories and legitimate employment. One worked as a civil engineering contractor who maintained base facilities, giving him access to building layouts and communication infrastructure. Another taught radio operation to naval aviation cadets, giving him detailed knowledge of frequency allocations and encryption procedures. A third worked in the base administration office, processing personnel records and mail distribution. None of them transmitted intelligence directly. The radio instructor would note frequencies on innocuous-looking paperwork that was later accidentally included with administrative documents. The contractor would sketch building modifications that contained encoded information about security measures. The administrator would intercept specific letters and replace them with identical envelopes containing additional hidden messages. The intelligence would accumulate in a central collection point, then move through Mexico in diplomatic pouches protected by neutral country immunity. Naval intelligence had investigated all three men at various points. Background checks revealed nothing disqualifying. Their families had been in America for decades. They held responsible positions, and their financial records showed no irregularities. The investigation closed each time with findings of no credible threat. What investigators didn't realize was how the network communicated internally. They weren't using radio transmissions or telephone calls that could be intercepted. They were using the base's own infrastructure, specifically the ventilation system. The engineering contractor had modified the ductwork in several buildings. During routine maintenance, certain offices now connected acoustically through the ventilation shafts, allowing conversations to be overheard from remote locations. It was brilliantly low-tech. No electronic equipment to detect, no written messages to intercept, just careful scheduling of meetings in specific rooms at specific times with someone listening elsewhere in the building. The radio instructor held his planning sessions in a storage room above the enlisted mess hall. Late at night, after training duties ended, he would meet with the administrator to coordinate the week's intelligence collection. They spoke quietly, careful to avoid names or explicit terminology, but they spoke in German, assuming nobody would be in the empty kitchen below to hear them. Then came an unlucky seaman who happened to draw kitchen duty on exactly the wrong night. Or, from Naval Intelligence's perspective, exactly the right night. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from and whether you'd heard about espionage at American training bases during World War II. The security threat from German intelligence networks was far more extensive than most people realize. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think about these counterintelligence operations. And if you're enjoying these deep dives into the hidden stories of World War II, hit that subscribe button. These stories take serious research to verify the details, and knowing you're out there makes it all worthwhile. Robert Daniels wasn't a trained counterintelligence operative. He was a 20-year-old from Nebraska who'd enlisted after Pearl Harbor and scored poorly enough on technical aptitude tests to be assigned as a mess attendant. But he'd grown up in a German-speaking household. His grandmother had immigrated from Bavaria. He understood every word coming through that ventilation grate. He set down the roasting pan carefully, avoiding any sound that might travel upward through the ductwork. The voices continued. Two men speaking in rapid German about radio frequencies, document identification numbers, and timing. One voice mentioned the Friday mail run to Houston, still in German, but the English words standing out. The other voice said something about radar test results from Building 7. Daniels had two choices: report this immediately to the shore patrol and risk looking like a fool if these turned out to be instructors reviewing captured documents, or confirm what he was hearing before involving authorities. He chose confirmation. The mess hall had a second-floor storage area directly above the kitchen, accessible through an exterior stairway. Daniels moved quietly to the side door, eased it open, and stepped into the humid Texas night. The flight line was quiet. A few lights burned in the control tower half a mile distant. He took the exterior stairs two at a time, testing each step for creaks. The storage room door was closed but not locked. Through the gap beneath the door, he could see light. The voices were clearer now, coming from inside this room, not some distant office. Daniels pressed himself against the wall beside the door and listened. The conversation was methodical. One man, the voice Daniels would later learn belonged to Carl Schneider, a civilian radio instructor, was reading from what sounded like a list. Frequency ranges, equipment designations, test dates. The other voice, Heinrich Müller, the administrative clerk, was apparently taking notes and asking clarifying questions. They discussed how to encode the information and which documents to hide it within. Then Muller said something that made Daniels's stomach tighten. The convoy routing data is more valuable. The Submarine Coordination Center needs to know the escort patterns. This wasn't document review. This was active espionage. Daniels retreated down the stairs, moving faster now. He had to report this, but he needed a witness, someone with enough rank to take action immediately. The shore patrol office was on the other side of the base, a 15-minute walk. The officer of the deck was closer, stationed at the administration building 3 minutes away at a run. He ran. Lieutenant Robert Hartley was reading incident reports when Daniels burst through the door, out of breath and technically out of uniform, still wearing his kitchen duty apron. Hartley looked up, irritated at the interruption. "Seaman, what the hell?" "Sir, there are men speaking German in the storage room above the enlisted mess. They're discussing radio frequencies and convoy routes. I speak German. I understood what they said. They're spies, sir." The words came out in a rush. Hartley's expression shifted from irritation to skepticism. "You're sure it was German, not just—" "My grandmother was from Bavaria, sir. I grew up speaking German. They said convoy routing Daten and U-boot coordination Zentrum. That's convoy routing data and submarine coordination center. Those aren't terms you use in a classroom, sir." Hartley reached for the telephone. "Stay here. Don't move." Within 8 minutes, 4 shore patrol officers and a naval intelligence investigator named Lieutenant Commander James Brennan were moving toward the mess hall. Daniels led them to the exterior stairway. The light still showed beneath the storage room door. Brennan positioned the shore patrol officers at the exits, covering both the interior stairway that led down into the mess hall and the exterior door. He drew his service pistol and nodded to Daniels. "You're certain they're still in there?" "Yes, sir. I've been watching the door. Nobody's left." Brennan knocked. Naval Intelligence opened the door immediately. The voices inside stopped. Silence. Then footsteps moving quickly. Brennan didn't wait. He shouldered the door open. 2 men stood in the storage room, surrounded by paperwork. Carl Schneider, 42 years old, wearing civilian clothes, and holding a clipboard. Heinrich Muller, 38, in his administrator's uniform, holding a pen above a notebook. Both men were frozen in the act of gathering papers from the table. The shore patrol officers entered behind Brennan with weapons drawn. "Hands where we can see them, now." Schneider's hands came up slowly, but Muller moved for the door, not the exterior door, the interior stairway. A shore patrol officer tackled him before he'd taken 3 steps. Papers scattered across the floor. Brennan knelt and picked up the nearest document. It was a frequency allocation table marked confidential. The margins contained handwritten notations in German, technical abbreviations, and numerical codes. Another document showed radar test results with similar annotations. A third was a partially completed letter written in commercial code, innocuous-looking phrases that clearly held concealed meaning. Brennan looked at Daniels, then at the ventilation grate in the floor. Understanding crossed his face. "You heard them through the ductwork?" "Yes, sir. I was cleaning the kitchen. They were speaking German and discussing classified information. I recognized technical terms and military vocabulary." Schneider finally spoke in unaccented English. "This is a misunderstanding. We're reviewing captured intelligence documents for training purposes. We have authorization at 2300 hours in a storage room, speaking German." Brennan gestured to the shore patrol. "Take them to the brig. Secure everything in this room. Nobody touches anything until the full investigation team arrives." The shore patrol officers handcuffed both men and led them down the interior stairway. Schneider went quietly. Muller was shaking, not with fear, with rage. As they reached the mess hall floor, he turned to look back up the stairs at Daniels. "Ein verdammter Geschirrspüler," Muller said quietly. "A damned dishwasher." Daniels met his eyes. Ein verdammter Geschirrspüler, der Deutsch spricht. A damned dishwasher who speaks German. The investigation that followed moved with unprecedented speed. Within 24 hours, Naval Intelligence had seized documents from Schneider's residence, Muller's office, and the engineering contractor's workshop. What they found represented 18 months of systematic intelligence collection targeting every classified program at Corpus Christi. The technical sophistication stunned investigators. The network had documented complete radio frequency allocations for carrier task forces, the exact frequencies that would let U-boats monitor American naval communications. They'd mapped security protocols for document handling, identifying which classification markings meant genuinely important intelligence versus routine administrative material. They'd noted the schedules of mail runs to Houston, where intelligence was being transferred to a contact working at the Mexican consulate. Most critically, they'd obtained preliminary performance data on the new AN/APS-4 radar system being tested for night fighter aircraft. This system would give American pilots the ability to detect Japanese aircraft in darkness, a decisive tactical advantage. The Germans wanted that information desperately, and they'd nearly gotten it. Lieutenant Commander Brennan's team found the modified ventilation system exactly as Daniels had described. The engineering contractor, arrested at his home the following morning, had installed acoustic connections between 7 buildings, creating an eavesdropping network that required no electronic equipment whatsoever. Interrogations revealed the system had been operational for 11 months. During planning meetings in those buildings, the network had recorded conversations about convoy schedules, aircraft performance, and operational doctrine. The FBI determined that at least 40 intelligence reports had been transmitted to Mexico. From there, they'd moved through diplomatic channels to Argentina, then to neutral Spain, and finally to Germany. The reports had reached the Kriegsmarine's U-boat command and the Luftwaffe's intelligence section. Some information was already in use. U-boats had successfully intercepted 3 convoys using frequency data obtained from Corpus Christi. What naval intelligence realized was how close they'd come to complete compromise. Within 2 weeks, the network had planned to transmit the radar performance data. That information in German hands would have given Japanese pilots the tactics needed to counter American night fighting capabilities. Hundreds of American aircrew would have died because of it. The investigation expanded rapidly. The FBI identified the Mexican consulate contact and surveilled his network connections. This led to 3 additional cells operating near other military installations, naval facilities in San Diego and Norfolk, and an Army Air Forces training base in Arizona. By June 1943, 21 people had been arrested for espionage-related activities. The most valuable discovery wasn't the immediate arrests. It was the intelligence about German collection priorities. The documents seized at Corpus Christi revealed exactly what information the Abwehr considered most valuable. Radio frequencies topped the list, followed by radar capabilities, followed by convoy routing. This knowledge allowed naval intelligence to implement targeted deception operations, feeding false information through channels the Germans trusted. One counterintelligence officer later wrote in his after-action report, "The Daniels incident provided a blueprint for German intelligence methodology. We learned they'd moved away from electronic surveillance to physical exploitation of infrastructure. This fundamentally changed how we approached facility security." The Navy issued new directives regarding ventilation system design, acoustic isolation of sensitive spaces, and multi-language monitoring of base populations. Security personnel received training in recognizing covert communication methods. Civilian contractors faced enhanced background investigations and continuous monitoring. The changes weren't flashy, no dramatic technology or expanded budgets, but they were effective. No similar network achieved comparable penetration at American military facilities for the remainder of the war. Carl Schneider and Heinrich Müller were convicted of espionage in September 1943. Federal prosecutors presented the documents seized from the storage room, testimony from naval intelligence investigators, and evidence of communications with German intelligence through Mexican intermediaries. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Both men received 30-year sentences at federal prison. The engineering contractor, Werner Hoffmann, was convicted separately and received 25 years. 8 other network members faced charges ranging from conspiracy to failure to register as foreign agents. 5 received prison sentences between 10 and 20 years. 3 were deported to Germany after the war under the Enemy Alien Act. None of the principal conspirators expressed remorse. At his sentencing, Müller stated simply, "I served my real country. I regret only that we failed." The intelligence they'd transmitted had concrete consequences. Naval intelligence calculated that frequency data from Corpus Christi had contributed to successful U-boat attacks on 3 convoys between January and March 1943, resulting in 17 merchant vessels sunk and over 200 American and Allied sailors killed. This attribution was based on German naval records captured after the war, which showed the Wolfpacks had possessed accurate frequency information for escort ship communications during those specific operations. But the network's dismantling prevented far greater damage. The radar performance data they'd nearly transmitted would have compromised night fighting capabilities across both Pacific and European theaters. Naval intelligence estimated this information would have extended the air war by months and cost hundreds of American aircrew lives. Robert Daniels received the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for preventing the intelligence compromise. The official citation noted his initiative, sound judgment, and devotion to duty in recognizing and reporting the espionage activity. He was promoted to Petty Officer 3rd Class and reassigned to naval intelligence work, screening foreign language communications and training security personnel in counterintelligence awareness. After the war, Daniels worked for the FBI's counterintelligence division until his retirement in 1968. He rarely spoke publicly about the Corpus Christi incident, telling one interviewer, "I was doing dishes and heard German, that's all. The real work was done by the investigators who built the case." The case influenced counterintelligence doctrine for decades. The concept of infrastructure exploitation using physical building systems for covert surveillance entered FBI and military training curricula. The Corpus Christi network became a case study in how sophisticated espionage could hide behind mundane cover identities. Intelligence agencies studied Schneider's methodology, avoid electronic communications, use civilian employment for access, exploit architectural features, maintain patience. The story also highlighted the value of seemingly minor personnel. Naval intelligence implemented programs encouraging all service members, regardless of rank or specialty, to report suspicious activity. The see something, say something mentality that emerged during the Cold War had roots in cases like this one, where a mess attendant proved more valuable than any technical surveillance system. Today, the ventilation grate that carried those incriminating German words is long gone, demolished when the Naval Air Station Corpus Christi underwent modernization in the 1960s, but the counterintelligence lessons remain relevant. Modern security services still teach the Daniels case as proof that human awareness remains the most effective detection system. Wars are won by soldiers and sailors fighting battles, but they're also won by the 20-year-olds washing dishes who recognize when something doesn't sound right, by the people who could ignore their instincts, finish their shift, and go to bed, but who choose instead to act. Schneider and Muller believed they were invisible. They'd engineered an intelligence system that defeated electronic surveillance, avoided paper trails, and exploited the chaos of wartime mobilization. They'd calculated every technical risk. What they couldn't calculate was that someone would be listening from the wrong place at the wrong time. Someone who happened to speak German because his grandmother had taught him. The mathematics of counterintelligence favor the attackers. Defenders must protect everything perfectly. Attackers need only find one vulnerability. But that mathematics changes when every person in an organization becomes a sensor. When the cook, the clerk, the maintenance worker all understand their part of the defense. March 14, 1943. A ventilation grate, a voice-speaking German, a seaman first class who chose to investigate rather than ignore. One moment of initiative, one decision to trust his instincts despite having no authority and facing potential ridicule. One recognition that something was wrong. The intelligence that didn't reach German U-boats saved merchant ships. The radar data that wasn't compromised saved air crews, all because someone doing punishment duty decided that hearing German at a naval air station warranted a second look. Sometimes the most important intelligence asset isn't a spy or a decrypt or a satellite. Sometimes it's an alert dishwasher. If you found this story as fascinating as I did researching it, I'd appreciate if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are dozens more untold stories from World War II's hidden intelligence war that deserve to be remembered. From codebreakers to double agents to ordinary service members who prevented disasters. I'll be bringing you a new one every week. What should I cover next? Let me know in the comments below.